the hidden fears that drive narcissistic behavior, understanding the psychology behind the mask. Hello and welcome to today's video. I'm glad you've joined me as we explore a topic that affects so many relationships and lives, the hidden fears that drive narcissistic behavior. Behind the confident smile, the grandiose claims, and the seemingly unshakable self-assurance of a narcissist lies something few people recognize: profound fear and insecurity. Today, we're going to pull back that curtain and examine what's really happening beneath the surface. Whether you're dealing with a narcissistic parent, partner, friend, or colleague, understanding the psychological underpinnings of their behavior can be incredibly empowering. Knowledge is protection, and my goal today is to equip you with insights that might help you maintain your sense of self and emotional well-being in these challenging relationships. Before we dive in, I want to clarify something important. This video isn't about demonizing people with narcissistic traits or suggesting that everyone with certain behaviors has a personality disorder. Rather, it's about understanding patterns of behavior that can be harmful and developing compassion, both for yourself and for those whose actions are driven by their own internal wounds. So let's begin our journey into understanding the paradox of narcissism, how someone can appear so confident yet be driven by such deep-seated fear. Part 1. The paradox of narcissistic confidence. The first thing most people notice about narcissists is their unwavering confidence. They enter rooms like they own them. They speak with absolute certainty. They seem impervious to criticism or doubt. It can be both impressive and intimidating. But this display of invulnerability is precisely that, a display. It's a carefully constructed facade designed to hide what lies beneath: profound insecurity and fear. Think of it as armor. For most of us, confidence is like a comfortable jacket we wear when we feel secure in ourselves. For narcissists, however, confidence isn't a jacket. It's a fortress. It's not just about feeling good. It's about survival. Why such extreme protection? Because beneath this armor lies what psychologists call a fragile self. Despite outward appearances, narcissists often struggle with deep-seated feelings of inadequacy, fear of being exposed as fraudulent or unworthy, terror of criticism or judgment, profound emptiness and lack of secure identity. This explains one of the most confusing aspects of narcissistic behavior: why someone who seems so self-assured can react with such disproportionate rage or hurt when faced with even minor criticism. What looks like an overreaction is actually the response of someone whose psychological defenses have been breached. Let me share an example. Imagine a narcissistic boss who presents himself as brilliant and infallible. When an employee gently suggests an improvement to one of his ideas during a meeting, he doesn't simply consider the feedback. He erupts, dismissing the idea outright and perhaps even humiliating the employee. What's happening here? For most secure people, such feedback might prompt a brief moment of discomfort followed by rational consideration. But for the narcissist, even gentle criticism feels like an existential threat because it pierces the protective bubble of perfection they've constructed. The anger isn't about the suggestion itself. It's about the terror of what lies beneath. If I'm not perfect, then what am I? This dynamic creates a perpetual state of anxiety. Narcissists must constantly maintain their image of superiority, which requires enormous psychological energy. They're like performers who can never leave the stage, always at risk of being unmasked, always on guard against exposure. Understanding this paradox is our first step in comprehending narcissistic behavior. What looks like unshakable confidence is actually a desperate attempt to outrun profound insecurity and fear. Part 2. How narcissists view others: extensions or threats. Now that we understand the inner landscape of narcissism, let's examine how these individuals view the people around them. This perspective fundamentally shapes their relationships and explains many of their most harmful behaviors. For narcissists, other people generally fall into one of two categories: extensions of themselves or threats to themselves. There's very little middle ground. When narcissists view you as an extension, they see you not as an autonomous individual with your own needs and desires, but as an appendage that exists to serve their needs. You might be valued, even cherished, but only insofar as you reflect positively on them, provide validation and admiration, fulfill their emotional or practical needs, comply with their wishes. This is why narcissists can seem so charming and attentive when you're meeting their needs. You're serving your purpose in their world. The problems arise when you assert independence or have needs of your own that conflict with theirs. On the other hand, if you're categorized as a threat, you become someone to be neutralized, controlled, or eliminated from their sphere of influence. You might be seen as a threat if you challenge their authority or expertise, receive attention or acclaim they feel entitled to, set boundaries they don't like, see through their facade. This binary view creates a world where genuine connection is nearly impossible. True relationships require recognizing the other person's separate identity and respecting their autonomy, precisely what narcissists struggle with. To illustrate this, let's consider how a narcissistic parent might relate to their child. When the child's achievements reflect well on the parent, the child is lavished with praise and attention. "Look at my brilliant daughter," the parent might boast to friends. But if that same child develops interests that don't align with the parent's self-image or expectations, suddenly they face criticism or emotional withdrawal. The child isn't being valued for who they are, but for how well they fulfill their role as an extension of the parent. This conditional regard is devastating to the child's developing sense of self, often creating wounds that persist well into adulthood. This view of others as either extensions or threats explains why narcissistic relationships feel so unstable. You might find yourself unexpectedly moved from one category to the other based on how well you're serving the narcissist's needs in any given moment. This inconsistency creates a state of hypervigilance in those close to narcissists, never knowing when admiration might turn to devaluation. But why do narcissists see others this way? It stems directly from the fears we discussed earlier. When your sense of self is fragile, the autonomy of others feels threatening. Their separate needs and perspectives introduce complexity and potential criticism into a psychological system that can't tolerate either. Part 3. Projection and Paranoia. One of the most confusing aspects of dealing with narcissists is their tendency to accuse others of precisely the behaviors they themselves exhibit. This psychological mechanism, known as projection, is a core feature of narcissistic behavior and directly connected to their underlying fears. Projection serves a critical purpose for narcissists. It allows them to disown aspects of themselves they cannot tolerate and instead locate these traits in others. This provides psychological relief while reinforcing their self-image as superior. Consider these common scenarios. A narcissist who frequently lies might obsessively accuse their partner of dishonesty. One who is contemplating infidelity might suddenly become suspicious that their partner is cheating. A narcissist who is selfish may complain constantly about how selfish everyone else is. What's happening here? The narcissist cannot integrate these negative traits into their self-image without threatening their fragile ego, so they project them outward. This isn't usually a conscious process. They genuinely believe others possess these qualities while remaining blind to their own behavior. This projection creates a pervasive paranoia. If the narcissist believes others are as manipulative, dishonest, or self-serving as they themselves are, though they don't recognize these traits in themselves, then the world becomes a threatening place filled with people who cannot be trusted. This paranoia affects every relationship. The narcissist is constantly on guard, looking for evidence of betrayal or attack. This hypervigilance creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Their suspicious behavior pushes others away or provokes negative reactions, which the narcissist then takes as confirmation that their paranoia was justified. Let me share an example that illustrates this cycle. Imagine a narcissistic individual who secretly envies their colleague's success. Instead of acknowledging this envy, they might project it outward, convincing themselves that the colleague envies them and is plotting against them. Acting on this belief, the narcissist might spread rumors or undermine the colleague. When the colleague eventually responds with understandable anger or distance, the narcissist points to this reaction as proof that the colleague was hostile all along. This paranoia extends beyond specific relationships to a general worldview. Many narcissists believe the world is fundamentally hostile. Most people have hidden agendas. Trust is naive. Vulnerability is dangerous. These beliefs create a self-perpetuating cycle of isolation. The more paranoid they become, the more they manipulate or attack others, which leads to real rejection or conflict, further confirming their paranoid worldview. Understanding this dynamic helps explain why narcissists often seem unable to learn from relationship failures. From their perspective, Each failed relationship doesn't indicate a problem with their behavior, but confirms their belief that others cannot be trusted. This projection and paranoia make sustained, healthy relationships nearly impossible for narcissists, unless they develop significant self-awareness and commit to personal growth, something that unfortunately rarely happens without intensive therapeutic intervention. Part 4: The impact on victims. So far, we've focused on understanding the narcissist's internal experience. Now, let's turn our attention to the profound impact narcissistic behavior has on those close to them. The partners, children, friends, and colleagues who often suffer tremendously in these relationships. When you're deeply involved with a narcissist, their fears don't just affect them. They become contagious. Their distorted reality gradually seeps into yours through a process sometimes called narcissistic abuse, which includes tactics like gaslighting, making you question your perceptions and memories; emotional manipulation, using your emotions as tools to control you; intermittent reinforcement, unpredictably alternating between praise and criticism; isolation, gradually separating you from support systems; projection, accusing you of their own negative behaviors. Over time, victims often internalize the narcissist's perception, developing what psychologists call learned helplessness. They begin to believe they truly are inadequate, overly sensitive, unlovable, or whatever criticism the narcissist repeatedly levies against them. The emotional toll can be devastating and includes chronic anxiety and hypervigilance, persistent self-doubt and diminished self-worth, confusion about reality, a result of gaslighting, feelings of hopelessness and depression, fear of abandonment, difficulty trusting others or themselves. Perhaps most insidiously, victims often become trapped in trying to fix the relationship by working harder to please the narcissist, a strategy doomed to failure because the problem lies not in the victim's behavior, but in the narcissist's fundamental inability to form healthy attachments. Let me share a story that illustrates this impact. Consider Sarah, who entered a relationship with a charming, attentive partner who initially made her feel special and valued. Gradually, her partner began criticizing her, subtly at first, then more overtly. When she expressed hurt, he accused her of being too sensitive. When she recalled previous loving behaviors, he denied they had occurred or claimed she had misinterpreted them. Over time, Sarah began to doubt herself. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe her memory was faulty. She worked harder to avoid criticism, walking on eggshells and abandoning her own needs to keep the relationship stable. Friends noticed she seemed diminished, less confident, less joyful, but when they expressed concern, she defended her partner. After all, she believed the problem was her inadequacy, not his behavior. This pattern, the victim gradually losing their sense of self while taking responsibility for the relationship's problems, is tragically common in narcissistic relationships. It's a direct result of the narcissist transferring their internal fears onto those closest to them. The damage doesn't end when the relationship does. Many survivors of narcissistic relationships struggle with lasting trauma that affects their ability to trust and connect with others. They may carry forward the habit of self-doubt, the tendency to apologize excessively, or the belief that they must be perfect to be worthy of love. Understanding these impacts is crucial both for those currently in relationships with narcissists and for survivors working to heal. Recognizing that these effects stem from the narcissist's distorted worldview, not from your own inadequacy, is often the first step toward recovery. Part 5: Control Dynamics. At the heart of narcissistic behavior lies an intense need for control. This isn't simply about being in charge. It's about creating an environment where the narcissist's fragile sense of self feels protected from potential threats. Understanding these control dynamics helps explain many of the most destructive patterns in narcissistic relationships. For narcissists, control isn't optional, it's essential. Their fear-based worldview makes them experience normal relationship give and take as actively threatening. If they aren't directing the situation, they feel vulnerable to criticism, abandonment, or exposure of their true self. This need for control manifests in various ways. Emotional control, dictating what emotions are acceptable in others. Decision control, insisting on making choices for others or the relationship. Narrative control, determining whose version of reality is accepted. Attention control, managing when and how attention is given and received. Let's examine emotional control, as it's particularly damaging. Narcissists often create rigid rules about what emotions others are allowed to express. Typically, the only acceptable emotions are those that center the narcissist: admiration, agreement, or concern for their needs. When you express emotions that don't serve them, like hurt in response to their behavior or joy about something unrelated to them, they may respond with dismissal, "You're overreacting," or "It's not that big a deal." Punishment, silent treatment, or escalating anger. Competing, "If you think that's bad, listen to what happened to me." Victimhood, making your emotion about how it affects them. This emotional control gradually shrinks the emotional range of those close to narcissists. Victims learn to suppress their authentic feelings to maintain peace, creating a profound disconnect from themselves. Decision control is equally significant. Narcissists often insist on making decisions for others or the relationship, everything from major life choices to seemingly trivial matters like what to eat for dinner. When others attempt to exercise autonomy, narcissists may respond with outrage, as if their authority has been challenged. These control dynamics create an asymmetrical relationship where the narcissist's needs consistently override everyone else's. Over time, victims may stop recognizing this imbalance as abnormal, instead internalizing the belief that their role is to accommodate while the narcissist's role is to direct. Consider Mark, whose narcissistic partner insists on approving his social plans, criticizes his clothing choices, and monitors his conversations with family. When Mark tries to assert independence, his partner responds with emotional outbursts or accusations of betrayal. Eventually, Mark stops making independent choices altogether, finding it easier to surrender his autonomy than face the inevitable conflict. This relinquishing of self is precisely what the narcissist unconsciously seeks, not necessarily because they want to harm others, but because they need others to function as predictable, non-threatening extensions of themselves. Understanding these control dynamics is crucial for those in relationships with narcissists. Recognizing control tactics for what they are, expressions of the narcissist's fear rather than legitimate relationship expectations, can help victims maintain their sense of self even while navigating these difficult dynamics. It's important to note that these behaviors often escalate when the narcissist feels their control slipping. This explains why attempting to set healthy boundaries with a narcissist frequently leads to intense backlash, what therapists sometimes call narcissistic injury or narcissistic rage. The narcissist experiences boundary setting not as a normal part of healthy relationships, but as an existential threat to their psychological survival. Part 6. Empowerment through understanding. Throughout this video, we've explored the fears that drive narcissistic behavior and the devastating impact these behaviors can have on others. Now, let's focus on how understanding these dynamics can empower you if you're dealing with narcissism in your life. Knowledge truly is power when it comes to narcissistic relationships. When you understand that the narcissist's behavior stems from their own deep-seated fears rather than your inadequacy, you gain critical psychological distance. This understanding doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does allow you to depersonalize it, which is essential for preserving your sense of self. Here are some ways this understanding can empower you. First, recognizing projection for what it is helps you avoid internalizing the narcissist's distorted perceptions. When a narcissist accuses you of being selfish, manipulative, or untrustworthy, you can recognize this as a reflection of their own traits rather than an accurate assessment of you. Second, understanding control dynamics helps you identify when your boundaries are being violated. Many victims of narcissistic relationships struggle to distinguish between reasonable relationship expectations and controlling behavior. Knowing that excessive control stems from the narcissist's fears rather than legitimate relationship needs helps you trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Third, recognizing the futility of trying to fix the relationship through perfect compliance can free you from an exhausting cycle. Many people spend years trying to be good enough to stop narcissistic criticism or emotional manipulation, not realizing that the criticism is about the narcissist's need for control, not actually about their behavior. For those who choose to maintain relationships with narcissistic individuals, perhaps because they're family members or co-parents, understanding these dynamics can help you develop strategies to protect your well-being. Gray rock technique: minimizing emotional reactions that feed the narcissist's need for drama. setting firm boundaries while expecting pushback, building a support network that validates your reality, practicing self-care that reinforces your identity outside the relationship. For those considering leaving narcissistic relationships, understanding the psychological underpinnings of narcissism can help you anticipate reactions and plan accordingly. Narcissists often respond to perceived abandonment with escalating attempts to regain control, which can range from intense love bombing to vengeful behavior. Remember that healing from narcissistic relationships takes time. The confusion, self-doubt, and hypervigilance that develop as protective mechanisms don't disappear overnight, even after the relationship ends. Be patient with yourself as you reclaim your sense of reality and rebuild trust in your perceptions. Most importantly, understand that you deserve relationships characterized by mutual respect, empathy, and recognition of your autonomy. The narcissist's inability to provide these elements reflects their limitations, not your unworthiness. Conclusion. As we conclude our exploration of the hidden fears driving narcissistic behavior, I want to leave you with a message of hope. Understanding narcissism, recognizing the fear beneath the facade, doesn't just help us make sense of difficult relationships, it can be the first step toward reclaiming our emotional freedom. Whether you're currently navigating a relationship with someone who has narcissistic traits, healing from past narcissistic abuse, or simply seeking to understand these dynamics, I hope this video has provided insights that resonate with your experience. Remember that your value isn't determined by someone else's ability to see it. Your reality matters, your emotions are valid, and your needs deserve respect, regardless of what anyone else might tell you. If this video has been helpful, please consider subscribing for more content on psychological well-being and healthy relationships. Thank you for joining me today, and I wish you strength and clarity on your journey.